Thanks for joining us today. My name is James Bowles. I am the Director of Technology at Mason Alexander, and I'm also a co-founder at Leaders of Tech. If anybody hasn't heard of Leaders of Tech, we are a community for people working in technology, interested in getting into tech, or interested in the impact tech is having on their way of life, their career. So essentially it's for everyone, and we are a very open community. We love diversity of thought and experience as we're a knowledge sharing community. Leaders of Tech's goal is to provide an ecosystem and a platform for our communities to connect, share, learn, and collaborate. And if you're interested in learning more about Leaders of Tech, check out leadersoftech.org or contact me directly. I'd like to give a quick shout out to our mentoring program that took place earlier this year. It's one of the success stories of the year. We decided to run this program because we thought we'd have the most impact on our community, and the feedback has been phenomenal. What we essentially did is we got 50 plus leaders in technology to mentor over 100 mentees at various stages in their career, and both the mentees and the mentors had phenomenal feedback. So much so that we've decided to make it a series. So again, if you're interested in learning more about that, please get in contact with us directly or through the website. Today I'm talking with David Singleton. Thanks for your time, by the way. It's a great pleasure to chat with David, and the theme of our conversation today will be around why Ireland has become the Silicon Valley of Europe. And people who are currently in that ecosystem, we're going to have some advice to you, and also people interested in potentially joining this ecosystem. Hopefully we've got some advice for you too. For those who don't know, David is the CTO at Stripe. He's helped them build their engineering and design functions for the past number of years. Prior to that, David was the VP of Engineering at Google, where he built some of the most ambitious engineering and design teams to work on some of the most innovating products in the world. So I think it's fair to say David knows what good looks like. So David, naturally I've done my research on Stripe. It's a company I'm very familiar with and I've been following it for years, but something that I'm less familiar with is this term economic infrastructure. I know that Stripe described their company as an infrastructure company, but economic infrastructure is not a term that I've come across often. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, thank you, James. It's a pleasure to be here today with you and with others in the Leaders of Tech community. And yeah, so economic infrastructure for the internet, that's what we do at Stripe. And at Stripe, we see our mission as increasing the GDP of the internet, literally helping businesses grow in ways that they otherwise might not be able to. And we got started by building a payments API. So an API that was really easy to get started with and integrate into some of the most innovative apps and companies in the world. And as we really paid a lot of attention to what our users, the businesses building on that API needed from Stripe, we realized that there's a tremendous amount of hard work that you have to do behind the scenes in a business in order to help it scale. And we can provide technology solutions to those problems. So it's not just about bringing money in, it's also about how do you manage all of the people in a marketplace or a platform that you might want to pay out to. How do you account for subscriptions and do invoicing and produce all of the kind of analytics that you need to run a business. And so in a very real way, when we build economic infrastructure for the internet, it means that our products help businesses get started and also help businesses grow in ways that they otherwise might not be able to. And if we build the right products for our users, then they'll be able to take their own engineering resources or general resources and put them on the problems that are unique to their business, and then rely on Stripe to deliver economic infrastructure to help them scale more effectively. And so we've been doing that for some time now, and today we serve businesses from the very, very small to the very, very large enterprises and multinationals, as well as the next generation of upstarts and startups across the world.
Awesome, thanks. Let's talk a little bit about Stripe in Ireland. I know that in Ireland we've got a lot of multinationals and we've got a great startup and scale-up ecosystem. Stripe has decided to make a dual headquarters. So they've got a headquarters in California and a headquarters here in Ireland. What's the reasoning behind that?
So that's right, we're dual headquartered in San Francisco and here in Dublin. Stripe has a tremendous Irish heritage. Our founders, John and Patrick, are Irish. But Stripe got started in the US. But as we were growing and scaling globally, we were looking for a great place to build that international team. And our presence here in Ireland actually started as a kind of operational presence, so doing support and a lot of important scaling work for the company. And we came to Ireland because it's a really great place to hire talent who can work across the whole of the EU and beyond. So a great place here to hire folks who can speak a whole bunch of different languages, Spanish, Portuguese, French, German, who are also really kind of well trained in how to operate and scale technology businesses. And so we've actually had that presence in Ireland for a very long time, since the very early days of Stripe. But about 4 years ago, we started to think about how we could scale our product development organization so that we could be close to our users all around the world. We're a global company, and we also really believe in getting to know the businesses that build on Stripe very intimately. We want to understand both how they're benefiting from the products they already use, but also what are the problems that they have that are adjacent to that. And some of those problems are unique to the markets in which they operate. And we want to be able to get to know them well, identify the right solutions to those problems, and then build them out. So because we had this vibrant office, and I mean, for what it's worth, across all the Stripe offices globally, people say that the crack in the Dublin office is the best.
I'm not surprised to hear that.
And I'm not surprised at all. So we already had this vibrant office, not just a fun place to work, but also a very effective one. And it was just a pretty obvious choice that when we wanted to start having product development closer to our users across Europe, that Dublin and Ireland more broadly was the right place to do that. And we've been doing that for a few years, and it's just gone tremendously well. We've been able to build some wonderful products specifically targeting the European market here. So we've added a bunch of countries to our general support. We've also added a bunch of relevant payment methods that are important here. But it's also the case that we have been able to build products that serve a global set of businesses from Ireland. For instance, our new tax product, which helps businesses deal with all of the sales tax that they have to take on board as they're selling in various different countries and jurisdictions, that's built entirely here. And increasingly, we're able to do things across the full gamut of Stripe from Ireland. And that's why we have decided to make, a little while ago, we decided to make Dublin our dual headquarters with San Francisco. And we expect to continue to grow our company tremendously here and across the rest of the EU with Dublin as our base.
Awesome. So people working in Ireland for Stripe can genuinely have global impact to the business. That's quite exciting. I know there's hundreds of roles advertised at the moment across engineering, across product and design. What else is driving that? Because it looks like it's a significant investment.
So we are growing rapidly, and really the only thing that drives our growth is the need and the opportunity to serve the businesses that build on Stripe further. So I mentioned before that we want to kind of get to really intimately understand those businesses. When we spend time with companies building on Stripe and listen to the challenges that they have and listen to the opportunities there are to help them grow more, we tend to learn about problems that are very adept to being solved with technology, but not yet addressed. And when we see themes across those problems, that's actually our invitation to go in and build the next layer of our economic infrastructure. And that's what drives our growth. It is literally finding great people to come and spend time with our users, identify those needs, and then build products. And that, of course, takes a whole team, engineers, product managers, designers, product legal folks are extremely important in our business. And that's why we grow, to serve our users better. And it's also why we are continuing to grow here, because we've been able to do all of that from Ireland.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about finding great people, a topic that's close to my heart. When you look at engineering talent, for example, or any technical talent, one of the things I know people identify is individual contributors quite often, and there's a whole discussion around how to empower individual contributors, but specifically management and leaders within engineering. How do you identify them, and how do you identify them internally to promote within, and also when you look external, what do you look for?
Yeah, great question. And first of all, as we grow, having great managers and technical leaders is extremely important. So if you think about having a small team, maybe you can get away with the team kind of self-organizing and figuring out what to do. But as organizations grow, it turns out to be incredibly important to have a really strong set of managers and leaders. And one of the things that I've certainly found over the course of my career, and very consistent with what we see at Stripe, is that folks who really deeply understand the work that their teams are doing and really care about what they're doing and why they're doing it and helping bring all of that context to their team are some of the most effective people. So what we tend to look for are folks who have typically previously done the job that their team are doing. And certainly for folks who are being developed from within, if you're becoming a manager for the first time, you're typically coming from a world where you've been doing the role that the rest of your team will be doing for some years. And folks who have a real passion for the business and what it is that we're actually trying to achieve. I think that when you care a tremendous amount about what it is that success looks like, then it becomes much easier to help your team and those around you identify what we need to do in order to be successful. So that passion for the mission is important, the passion for why we're doing it. And then also just a remarkable ability to identify the right problems, identify them clearly, give teams context for why those are the things that matter, and then actually just roll up their sleeves and get involved in solving those. And very often that means working with other managers and leaders, being very open and finding the reasons why the teams can help each other, and then collaborating to get the job done.
Excellent. You're the king of side projects. You have a lot of interesting hobbies and interests. I've been reading your blog recently and been really entertained. I don't know where you get the time for it, but you can tell me a little bit about that later. You're passionate about cooking and documenting recipes. You're making your own wine at the moment. You've built websites for your kids' school, and you've built, I think on the weekend, an offline version of Wikipedia, which I can't really get my head around at the moment. That all kind of describes someone who's a great appreciation for a growth mindset. How important is it for you to identify a growth mindset in a potential candidate or a potential leader in your business?
Great question. I do have a lot of side projects, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of them. But every side project that I take on has some element, like the thing that is exciting to me about doing those things is there's some element where I'm learning and trying to do something that I haven't done before. And that growth mindset, that's what I think of as a growth mindset, is really just having the belief that if you have to solve a new challenge, that you'll be able to do that, and leaning into equipping yourself to do that. And that is extremely important in anyone that we hire, and I think anyone who any company might like to hire. So I think if you look at the most innovative companies and you look at the most successful teams, there really is this consistent mentality that we are going to run into challenges, and that's okay, because we have both the wherewithal personally, but also the team spirit of collaboration, that when we run into challenges, we'll see those as like opportunities. We'll actually try, and it's okay if we maybe fail the first time, because we're going to learn from that. Yeah. And so that mindset is extremely important. And it's absolutely something that we at Stripe look for in folks that we are hiring, or folks that are moving into new roles, for instance. And I think that the reason that's important is the world's just changing very, very rapidly. If you think about economic infrastructure, over the course of the past decade, in so many ways, changes in regulation and just patterns of how people want to do things with money in the world, the whole secular trend from offline to online commerce, it just creates a constant environment of change. And in that kind of an environment, it's really important to have this mentality that as things change, there are going to be new challenges. And our default assumption is that we're building teams that can themselves adapt to solve those challenges.
So embrace the unknown and the learning and see it as an opportunity.
Exactly.
Okay, excellent. And another thing I was curious about, a lot of our audience will be from around the world, particularly around Europe. We've got a lot of big names in Ireland. We're delighted, and Stripe is a bit of a superstar with the brothers who've started it and has an Irish success story linked to it. So it's well known, and we've got lots of other big brands. What kind of goes under the radar sometimes is our startup and scale up and small to medium business ecosystem, which really I think is the beating heart of the Irish tech scene. What is your advice? You've had an incredible career. What is your advice to those startups or scale-ups or smaller businesses, many of which are members of our community, when they've proven their product, they know they've got something, they're looking to scale, what do they need to leave behind? What do they need to bring with them? What are the common mistakes for companies with that challenge?
Great question. And I agree. I think one of the things that is excellent about Ireland right now is that it's not just big companies. It's not just established companies. There really is a very vibrant startup scene and scale-up scene developing here, and I'd love to talk more about that in a few minutes. But to answer this question in particular, I think about companies at the kind of stage that you're describing as having found product market fit, right? So they've set themselves up to solve a particular problem and have managed to find the first kind of nibbles of success with that. So there's a set of customers and or users for maybe a consumer product, and they're coming back every day and they're getting real value, right? So you find some semblance of product market fit. And now, of course, the challenge is how do you capitalize on that and get out to as many businesses or as many people in the world as you possibly can. And that is a phase. I mean, obviously, the very beginning phase of any company is tough because are you going to find the product market fit? But this is a phase where you can win or lose very easily because it's all about growing fast enough in order to capitalize on the product market fit, while growing slow enough that you don't lose all of the ability to actually execute well. So, I mean, a few things that I see, both in the kind of early Stripe journey and also in some of the most effective companies that go through that scale-up stage, is folks being really, really mindful about what it is that got them where they are today that they need to hold on to into the future. And what it is that got them where they are today that needs to change. So, for instance, if you think about Stripe, I think Stripe is well known in the early days for doing a lot of things that don't scale. And that being a really important thing to do in order to find that really early product market fit. So, I mean, for instance, you will hear stories of the Collison installation. So John and Patrick, if they were talking to a potential user of Stripe, and that person said, yeah, I'd like to do it, they'll actually sit down with them and do the integration with them. So building the code that integrates Stripe into their product or service with them. And that was tremendously valuable. So number one, we get a user right away on the spot. Number two, we get to have the experience of seeing how they understand the product firsthand. And imagine the context that brings back into everything else that we do. And that's very important and really informed a lot of the early culture. It still informs the culture today. All that stuff I was telling you about how we want to understand our users intimately and get to understand their business problems, because that's helping us decide what to do next. That still comes from that early ethos that turned out to be so important. But it's probably fairly self-evident. If you want to serve millions of businesses, you're not going to be able to sit down with each one in turn in order to do the integration.
You need a lot of brothers.
You need a lot of brothers, or you need a lot of people to think about what's the system that we can put together here, and what's the product version of what we've been doing in person. So, for instance, if you look at Stripe's documentation, so stripe.com/docs, you'll find that we take a relatively different approach to a lot of other tech companies. So an example is if you look at the docs while you're signed into Stripe, you'll actually see lots of examples that come from your own account rather than just the generic examples that were in the docs in the first place. You'll also find things like integration builders where we give you all the code and a step-by-step approach, which is really the scaled-up version of that Collison installation that I talked about at the start. So it's about finding the kind of heart of what you've been doing that brought the success you've got so far, but figuring out how to do that in a way that scales. So that's kind of the product and company angle of things. The other thing that I think is really important is just making sure that you're very conscious of what are the people and the skill sets that you need to bring in order to help you with that scaling. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes.
For sure. Another thing that comes up fairly regularly when I speak to members of our community is we are extremely open. We've got people who are graduates still in school all the way through to global CTOs. We also have CFOs. We've got heads of marketing. We've got people from all verticals of business and all sectors. Something that comes up again and again is that connection between tech and the business. Now it comes from two angles. It comes from people who are maybe in engineering fields and wondering how to partner with the business and bring them on a journey and vice versa. But what would your advice be to people working in a technical role around what's the best way to partner with business or even just to communicate with them?
Yeah, great question. I think tech's a really interesting industry because if you kind of rewind the clock about 20 years, I think that folks used to think about the tech functions inside companies as being quite separate from some of the other parts of the company. And that goes for both kind of traditional industries and even technology-centric companies themselves. But increasingly, I think what you see in the most effective and innovative companies is that folks realize that technology just is everywhere. Every single part of your business and business operations can benefit from technology. If you are a tech company selling software or hardware products, then it's really important to find the right ways to integrate the thinking in the product into how the whole of the rest of the company works. So at Stripe, I think of product development as a team sport that crosses not just the kind of traditional tech job families you'd think of, like engineers, designers, product managers, but very deeply involves folks from our finance teams and from our product legal teams and so forth. So it really is a team sport. And increasingly, many companies take that same approach, and I think it's a good one. But there can be this challenge of communicating across companies, which is that many times engineers will assume that there is a relatively deep understanding of some of the constraints of technology in other parts of the business. And other parts of the business will assume that there's a relatively deep understanding of what it is that the business needs on the part of folks building the software. And so the best way to create great collaboration across functions within, I think, any company, it really is just all about communication. It's all about asking the right questions and spending time up front to make sure that you understand the problems that each other need to solve. So very, very frequently, before I was at Stripe, I would see that I'd be kind of thrown into a situation where I was working with someone and we just jump straight into the work, right? So yeah, we've got this thing to get done. What's kind of in the way? I think that the most effective teams actually start somewhere much higher level, which is let's take a second here and figure out what are our goals and do we understand how we are going to help each other in that? At Stripe, the main way that I find effective to do that is actually to turn this all around and think about our users. So the businesses that build on Stripe. And what are we doing when we're doing this project together that is actually serving them. And when we anchor all of the discussions around what we're trying to achieve and what those businesses need, almost always the right work, tremendous alignment, and a kind of real esprit de corps to solve the problem flows from there. And you can find the equivalent for your business, but really it's about being very communicative and being aligned on the goal, and then letting everything else flow from there.
Yeah, I can imagine a lot of the challenges come from, well, miscommunications, of course, but misalignment, and maybe a misunderstanding of what the goal is.
Yeah, and alignment's one of these kind of corporate sounding words. I think it really just means like, do we both understand what we're trying to do?
Yeah. And often the answer is no.
Indeed.
So let's take a step back. Let's have a chat about it.
Exactly.
Very good. And then there's also coming from the other angle, so like people that want to work with tech and want to get the best out of them as well. So I think one of the new phenomenons is that every company now is a technology company. Mm-hmm. Not every tech company is building microprocessors or doing deep tech stuff. Retail is massive, and obviously Stripe is pivotal to the transformation of retail worldwide. Health, the list goes on, education, everything. So what would you say to people on the other side of the fence that are trying to embrace? Now, we covered the communications piece, but do people need to become a bit more tech savvy? Is that a misconception that people need to understand tech to get the best out of it?
I think, again, great question. I think that an interest in what technology can do is extremely valuable to improve execution in any business these days. I don't think that it is necessary to understand every single detail. I mean, that is why most companies do employ software engineers these days in order to build the detail and complete the detailed execution of what's required. But I actually genuinely think that an interest in and an appreciation of some of the possibilities, which are essentially endless. So if you think about technology and software in particular, it can be a difficult area to understand because the possibilities are literally endless. You have an environment where you can build infrastructure and products that do absolutely anything. However, the constraints can sometimes also be difficult to appreciate. So, for instance, without understanding, some of what the company might already have in place, it can be difficult to understand why one thing might take, a month, and something that feels, maybe relatively equivalent from the vantage point of someone operating in a different part of the business could take a year. And therefore, I think an appreciation of some of the building blocks is valuable. And that's one of the reasons that I think it's exciting that the Leaders of Tech community here in Ireland is really welcoming not only to what you would think of as those typical job functions, but anyone in order to learn more. And I think that's going to really help Irish businesses or businesses that put significant technology functions here in Ireland to be some of the most innovative businesses in the world.
Yeah, it's a really important point, and it's something we set out from the start to be inclusive of everyone, not just techies or what people perceive as techies. And actually, one of our kind of passions is also breaking down some of those barriers to people where they might be daunted about getting into tech, or they might have a misunderstanding about what you actually need to be getting into tech. You run design teams, anybody from an artist to a musician to obviously an engineer, through to lawyers, through to communications, marketing people. You could be anything and you could get into tech. And one of the things we're trying to do in the community is to break down those barriers, but also get to people at crucial times in their life. Mm-hmm. So when they're in school and they're deciding what to do in college, when they're in college, they're deciding what to do afterwards, and all the way through their career if they're looking to pivot. And I get great enjoyment having chats with people about firstly, why do they want to pivot? Because it's not always the right decision. But if it is, how can we support that? What's your thoughts on that kind of challenge around misconceptions?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great point. I think that there simply are misconceptions that exist out there in the world about what a successful technologist looks like. images from, I think, mostly the 80s of geeky, mostly teenage men playing computer games or being into, a kind of antisocial version of technology. It's just completely wrong. So, I mean, first of all, as hopefully was kind of clear from what I was saying, to be successful at technology really requires a huge amount of collaboration, like talking to other people and helping figure out how you can solve problems together. So it's a very social activity. It's also not the case that it's just all about coding. There are a ton of different functions and kind of capabilities that come together to build the best products in the world. Design is a great example. Some of the most effective designers obviously have an appreciation for the underlying technology, but it's something that you can build up once you're actually in a company or in a role. What's really important is that you actually have a real understanding of people. What is it that they need in order to have experiences that are easy to use? And then bringing that together with an aesthetic appreciation is really important to build effective products. And in actual fact, some of the products that I find myself using that I find most frustrating are ones where it's very clear that the technology is actually pretty solid at the core, but the expression of that technology in terms of a user interface, something that understands what the actual user's life is like, that you're trying to solve the problem within, is poor. Like, those are very frustrating products, and that's not going to help all of these companies that will exist to be super successful. So it is a team sport across lots of different disciplines.
I've heard you use the term enchanting when you're talking about products. Engineers can build a product. Some extremely talented ones can make it look good too. But talk to me a little bit about making a product enchanting and why that's important.
Yeah, so I think a product that's enchanting, at Stripe we often talk about surprisingly great. So just think about products that you use, software products maybe, that you use over the course of the last few days. You can probably think of a couple that you feel like you have to use, right? Maybe these have been chosen by the folks in some department of the company that you work for. And then think about the products that you chose to use and what's the difference between them. Typically, it is that the products that you choose to use don't just get the job done, but they also make you feel in a very real way like they're either trying to kind of delight you as that happens, or they kind of understand what it is that you're up to, and they accelerate the progress that you can make through it. So that's what I think of as an enchanting product, one where when you're using it, you feel several moments of delight where it just did better than you were expecting it to. They didn't just try to get the job done, they also tried to demonstrate that they understood what you were actually trying to accomplish. And that actually takes a tremendous amount of care and love and attention. So to build products that are enchanting, you do have to get to know users. You can't sit down with every single user, but you can sit down with many of them and understand the path that they're on, the journey that they're on as they use a product, and pick up on the places where they got a little frustrated. That's a place things need to change. Pick up on a place where they were really happy. That's something that you can maybe do more of. And examples at Stripe include, I already mentioned docs where you get samples that kind of relate to your own business. We actually put a tremendous amount of care and attention into our error messages, right? So those are the things that most people don't see on a typical day. But when you run into an error message, so if you're a developer integrating Stripe, hopefully we make the documentation as good as possible, but you will find that you'll make some mistakes or there'll be some places where you don't quite understand each other, and you're going to get an error message. Well, the best error messages, I think, the ones that feel enchanting, are the ones that then tell you how to fix it. We think this is what went wrong, here's how to fix it. And we try to do that at Stripe. And that can be a relatively unconventional thing for that part of the product to do. But that's an example of how you can take something that may seem fairly prosaic and mundane and actually turn it into a moment of delight.
It's an opportunity. Excellent. So the theme of the discussion today was around why Ireland is the Silicon Valley of Europe. It's a pretty bold statement, but I think it rings true. You've worked in Silicon Valley. What do you see in Ireland that's changed over the last 10, 15 years? Why can we make that claim today?
Yeah, well, I think Ireland has changed with respect to tech a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. When I think about Silicon Valley and what has made Silicon Valley the kind of preeminent place in the world to build a technology business or scale a technology business, there are several things that contribute to that, but there's one that really sticks out, which is it is an environment where people really help each other. And so there is a tremendous network of expertise, and that comes to some extent with just time. But then the folks who are experts are extremely willing to share their experience. So, when I am in San Francisco, if I run into a particular kind of new problem that I haven't encountered before, I know that there are 4 or 5 people that I can drop an email to or call. And I think remarkably, those folks will actually answer and spend time chatting with me. And by the way, I'd try to do the same thing for others. And that is tremendously valuable because it means that any company that's being built in that kind of environment has the opportunity not only to have to rely on their own wherewithal to solve problems, but they can draw on this kind of huge domain of expertise from the folks around them. And I think we've built that in Ireland. So if you think about Ireland or the Irish tech industry over the last 10 or 15 years, tech here really got started with the big companies. So companies like Intel, Microsoft, Apple, several others, IBM, put their European operations centers here. And by the way, I really appreciate that I think a lot of those companies invested deeply in technology education in Ireland. So for instance, I probably wouldn't have gotten into the tech industry if it wasn't that Intel, who were here, they built a semiconductor fab in Leixlip, who were here, actually put a lot of money into education of folks in school in Ireland then. So I spent some summers at Dublin City University learning about how to program, and that was all paid for by Intel. So it got started with the big companies, and not just folks at high school, also training folks who were hired into those companies inside of them to start understanding what the broader global tech industry looked like. So it started with the big companies. There was then another wave of some of the most innovative kind of big upstarts also seeing the success of those big companies and putting not only their operation centers, but also product development centers for pieces of their business covering Europe here in Ireland. So that's companies like Google and Facebook, and of course there are many more. And what that has spurred is a whole generation of new companies started here or getting started here relatively early in their life that have benefited from all that expertise. So if you think of companies like Intercom, they're just up the road here, and they are building global product from Ireland with all the functions I talked about, engineering, product, design. And I really don't think that it would have been possible to set up a company like that here 15 years ago. But the reason that it is now possible is that history of investment that worked really well, because the talent in Ireland is phenomenal. Great education system, really great access to other talent across Europe that can kind of come together with folks that are already here. And it's very easy to move to Ireland. It's a great place to live as well. That has really created this set of expertise that now can kind of help each other learn from each other. And that, I think, reminds me a tremendous amount of what I just said at the beginning about Silicon Valley. And genuinely, I think that if you look at what that creates, it's not only one example, but there are hundreds of startups now getting started in Ireland that find that they have access to expertise, advice, increasing the access to capital. So in the beginning, this came from Enterprise Ireland and the Irish Development Agency, but increasingly there are top-tier venture capital outfits that are right here. And I really believe that we are already at the point where you can start the most innovative companies in the world right here in Ireland and scale them all the way up to global success.
Awesome. So you've answered my next question, which is why should someone consider moving to Ireland to build out their tech career? There's loads of great examples in there for that. I'm conscious of time. Is there
one thing I'd say to build on that, though, it's not just about tech. Ireland is just a wonderful place to be. If I think about all the places that anyone might want to be in the world right now, Ireland just is a burgeoning economy, but also a burgeoning art scene and great things to do. So I think of all the places that you could consider coming to right now or consider being to do that kind of work, Ireland is absolutely right up there at the top.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've worked internationally myself, and moving back to Ireland has been just incredible. And I think it's a great ecosystem as well of highly accessible cities. The ways of working have changed to make Ireland even more competitive, and I think we're doing a lot of good. So I was just going to ask you a final question because I'm just conscious of time. Again, thank you so much for your time today. You've been very generous with us, and I've really enjoyed the chat. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to talk about, or anything that we covered that you wanted to dig in a little bit deeper to?
I think one of the things that I'd really like to leave everyone with is the idea that I think if you have any preconceptions of what tech in Ireland is about, it might be that you can join a company in Ireland and you'll get to work on either back office stuff or the things that specifically should happen there. And that's just not the case anymore. So both at Stripe and I think at many other companies, it's the case that there is so much expertise and ability to engage deeply with people and businesses all across the world that globally relevant products are being built here. And I'm really excited at the next chapter of growth of the Irish tech industry that's going to make possible.
Awesome, as am I. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and thanks for everyone joining in. We will be doing a follow-up panel discussion, and this will turn into a series event. So really keen to hear everybody's feedback, and I'll leave you with, if you're interested in learning anything more about leaders of tech, please check out our website or get in contact with me directly. Thank you. Cheers. Thanks again. So following on from our great discussion with David Singleton, I would like to welcome our panel to continue the conversation on why Ireland has become the Silicon Valley of Europe. I'd like to say huge thanks to the panel for talking to me today and sharing their time. I will do a quick intro, and as I put questions to the panel, you might give an introduction to yourself as well, just to extend on from my very brief intro. So I'd like to welcome Dorothy Creaven. She's a tech leader, an entrepreneur. She is currently the Vice President, Managing Director, and Site Lead at Rent the Runway, based in Galway. Thanks, Dorothy, for joining us today. I'd also like to thank Dhanya Jayachandra. She is the co-founder and CTO of Unitek. Dhanya leads Unitek's engineering, infrastructure, security, data science teams, whilst also overseeing product development. So a very busy role and a really exciting company, Dhanya. So looking forward to hearing a little bit about that. Dave O'Donovan is the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer at Aer Lingus. Before joining Aer Lingus and the aviation industry in 2017, Dave was based in New York for many years. He worked with a lot of startups, incubators, and innovation partners. So excited to hear a little bit more about that journey and what you're currently doing as well, Dave. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Dorothy, I might start with yourself. It's been a really exciting time at Rent the Runway with the recent IPO. So congratulations. What did this milestone mean to the company? It's obviously a very significant one. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so Rent the Runway is a fashion company and a technology company paired together. So it's just to give a bit of background, we're really changing the way women get dressed in the US every day. We have over 700 brand partners in for fashion rental, for accessories, and it also gives the option to buy clothing as well. And in Ireland, we're software engineering and machine learning engineering space as well. So the company is 12, 13 years old at the moment. So it was a really major milestone for us to hit. And I think given, the difficulties through COVID for every single company, for many companies, I should say, in the last 2 years, I think reaching this milestone where we are today was an incredible achievement by all involved. So we're delighted.
Excellent. Well, congrats again. Our discussion today is about why Ireland, in across Europe and the world, why Ireland is a unique place. And obviously it's been on a journey. One of the factors that keep coming up when I speak to people about Ireland is its unique ecosystem of city hubs. Ireland is a highly accessible place. So I talk to people in Silicon Valley who might have to go across California and it's a flight, go across Silicon Valley and it's hours in a car. Ireland is really accessible. So what I'd like to ask you is, why was Galway selected as a European headquarters?
Yeah, I think really a lot of research was done around, why Ireland, why a number of different cities, and Galway ultimately was chosen because of the real richness in culture and also the availability of talent here. So I think Galway is pretty well known for, its festivals, arts, music, and that is a really, really good match for our employees as well. So there's a massive pool of talent here. We collaborate really closely with the universities here, NUI Galway and GMIT. And really the other companies and depth of talent that are here for a lot longer than we are here in Ireland really stood the test of time and has stood the test of time. So we're a newish company to Galway. We're about 2.5 years in now, and it's been an incredible journey. I was the first employee on the ground here, so starting the Galway office, and the 2.5 years now has just flown by. But there's a very good match culture-wise. In Rent the Runway, culture is a really core part of why our employees like to come and work with us. And I think the match there between like everything happening in Galway and the skills availability, it was a perfect match for us, really.
What does it look like today versus when you were, a company of or a site of one?
Yeah, well, now at least I have lots of people to talk to, which is fantastic. So really, it was starting everything from the beginning. Rent the Runway, when you go to the US, it's a really big brand. I mean, it's really a movement around fashion rental, which is it's just an incredible story over the last 12 or 13 years. However, when I started 2.5 years ago, Rent the Runway wasn't a well-known brand in Galway or in Ireland, in fact. So I think part of my job really was to figure out, how do we let people know what an amazing company Rent the Runway is. So really being quite thoughtful about how we get our brand name out there. What do we represent? Who do we represent here in Ireland? So that was one core part of it. So I had my thinking cap on to figure out the best way of doing that. And then, in parallel, it was really, well, which teams do we want to stand up first? What are the core competencies we're looking for? Who are the engineers that we need to hire to really work on some critical problems that have really helped us scale from a technology organization perspective? So now we're, quite a couple of years here, and there are 10 different teams working across a multitude of different areas, including software engineering, product management, machine learning, quality engineering, just everything and anything. And I think one of the reasons why people love working at Rent the Runway is primarily because our engineers are working on complex problems and a lot of really interesting challenges, like how we move inventory around. We have a lot of inventory, how we scale as an organization. It's a very popular platform. So it's been incredible to really see it from, just one person to scale to where we are today.
Awesome. Yeah, some journey. Dhanya, you've had an interesting time here in Ireland as well, and scaling a company during the pandemic. Before we jump into that, we chatted before this session about your background, and you graduated and you worked for Oracle for a couple of years, and you're based in India, and you thought about where in the world you might move for your career, and what kind of opportunities were out there. And I think you mentioned you had Ireland on the shortlist, Germany, Singapore. Tell us a little bit about why you chose Ireland and how you landed here.
Yeah, so when I was looking at doing my master's, actually, I was already working for a number of years as a Python developer within Oracle, and I was really introduced to machine learning on my professional careers. And so all I really wanted from my master's was just to learn machine learning as an additional skill set, and because that's like the future and the present, I think. And Ireland offers very niche courses, which are very geared towards the previously industry professionals. So I chose the data science one, and I already had programming, so I dropped programming and took stats. But there are a lot of other niche courses as well in Ireland, like cybersecurity, cloud computing, like just this one skill that you want to add on to. And also a lot of conversion courses for people who are not from a technical background. The other interesting fact to me was that it was 1 year, so I can get my skill and get on with the professional career. English speaking, that was also one of the reasons. And plus, really, like you say, Ireland is the Silicon Valley of Europe. When you look up Ireland, there's all these companies, like for this such a small country, like the number of companies that have set up their headquarters here is just, so that was also one of the reasons why I chose Ireland.
Excellent. And you've actually gone on to hire a lot of people who've done these specialist masters as well. I think you're partnering with UCD at the moment. I know you did your masters in UCC, but tell us a little bit about how you hire people across Ireland, and I guess the advantage of partnering with a college and with a particular specialist masters. Yeah.
So we do work closely with a number of universities. Internship program is the one that we have partnered with UCD. We have helped about 15 students in the past 3 years achieve their masters. And they have, again, we're hiring for people who are developers specialized in data science or machine learning to really bring it to production. And also, our headquarters, company headquarters, is in TU Dublin. So we do also partner with them on leveraging research talent for the company research. We have sponsored a master's from UCC, Cork, really bring all the university talents into industry kind of.
Excellent. And you obviously studied in Cork, and you actually started working with Unitek from Cork, and I believe they're kind of based in Dublin. What was that like, kind of working and studying and kind of across 2 cities in Ireland?
Yeah, it wasn't. So I was still a full-time student. I was in my 2nd semester when I met Martin, and he was based in Dublin. I was in Cork. Remote working was the only way we could make it happen. So I'd come to Dublin once a week, gather requirements, we'd discuss the progress, what we'll do this week, project requirements, and I'd go back to Cork and develop them remotely. I had remote working experience. I was working with Oracle, and Martin himself worked for Vodafone and many global organizations. We didn't realize we were putting the foundations for remote working at the time. So it was just a hybrid work and really it's only 2 hours on the train between Cork and Dublin, so not much difference. Sometimes it took me 2 hours to go from home to work back home in Bangalore. So yeah.
I learned that in Australia. I spent a few years working out there, and people would travel an hour and a half to drive to the beach, on a day out, and then drive back, and they wouldn't kind of give out about it. Commutes could be, a plane ride away. And in Ireland, we can get from one side of Ireland to the next, in a matter of hours. So it just gives us that ability to access that talent all around Ireland, which is pretty powerful. Dave, you worked internationally for a while. You've worked in Ireland, obviously. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of when you started out in your career, what was Ireland like versus what it's like now? And I guess, what have you learned from working abroad and then coming back to Ireland?
Yeah, thanks, James. So when I started my career, the big dominant sort of places you went to work to do anything in the technology space tended to be primarily financial services. So I think many people who sort of started their careers in the late 90s, early 90s would have started in financial services. And I spent many years working around the various banks with one of the consulting companies. And then in 2011, I got an opportunity to go to New York and join actually, as it happens, a fashion startup. Though I wasn't the one choosing any of the fashion. I was looking at the technology side of things. And I was there 6 months, and I kind of sat back and I said, wow, I have learned more in the last 6 months than I learned in the previous 4 years. I had heard about agile ways of working. I'd heard about iterative development. I'd heard about focus on value, but I'd never done that before. And it was just transformational in terms of how you think about developing product, how you think about shipping product, and how you think about getting feedback. The startup that I went to was kind of trying to use analog ways of personality matching. So it used archetypes, which is a Jungian concept, and it tried to use the archetypes to attribute what a customer or a visitor might be interested in from a fashion perspective or from a news perspective. But of course, we had just missed the boat, because really clickstream data and understanding where you went and what you did on the internet was far more informative than Jungian archetypes. So we never really got where we wanted to get with that, but from a learning perspective, for me, it was just tremendous. So when I came back to when I came back to Ireland, I got the opportunity to join Aer Lingus. And I sort of remember coming in on day one and saying, right, let's go agile. And then I realized that, greenfield sites and modern tech stacks are fantastic for agile. When your tech stack is sort of 60, 70 years old and holds the business together, it's a lot harder to make that transition. And I suppose I've spent the last couple of years trying to modernize that stack so that we can be truly agile in the way we work and get that product into our customers' hands.
Excellent. And what kind of differences do you see now in Ireland, kind of out there in the market, versus back in the day? I mean, you've already touched on the fact that financial services was the only kind of game in town back then, but now you hire a lot of people coming from lots of different backgrounds, I'm sure. Tell us a little bit about kind of why you think Ireland's been able to build this ecosystem, and I guess why all these companies now can take advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tremendously exciting time to be a technology professional in Ireland or thinking about coming to Ireland, because it really has that depth of opportunity in a very small geographic location that's probably unrivaled anywhere but Silicon Valley. You have sort of 70 years of focused strategy on foreign direct investment that sort of paid off all through those years, but really just took off in the 2000s with the sort of the internet companies looking at Ireland, looking for European base and setting up here. And the number of people that sort of started in those internet companies, the early Googles, and then maybe onto Dropbox and Facebook, and then came out of those after 5 or 6 years with the confidence and the knowledge to build modern tech companies, and then started looking to do that themselves. It's all inspiring. And I think the various bodies in Ireland have been very smart around how they've set it up. So the IDA have obviously been instrumental in bringing that investment into Ireland. But here you've got the local enterprise boards there to help you if you want to start a business up to about €3 million. Then you have Enterprise Ireland kicking in. Then you have the incubators and the likes of Dogpatch Labs, and even this event that you're doing, James. There's so many people willing to get involved to help you innovate and to help you build a new company. So if you're outside of Ireland thinking, I wouldn't mind a technology career, where's a good place to go? I want to speak English and I want to be in Europe. It's a really attractive option, because you can start in one company and then after 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, decide, you know what, I'm going to try something different, or I'm going to go somewhere different, because there's just so many other opportunities here. And there's a great community. Dublin's quite a small city. Galway's even smaller. There's a really great community, but they're both really friendly cities, so it's quite easy to meet people.
Yeah, no, I like that. And actually that rings true with a lot of what David was talking about previously, about kind of why we're unique and some of the similarities he's seen in Dublin, Cork, Galway, the whole of Ireland really. and Silicon Valley. I mean, there's lots of tech hubs around the world. Obviously, New York is another big one. You know, there's these huge ones in Asia, and there's even probably another couple in Europe that are really, really great places to build a career. But I think one of the things that stood out that David mentioned, and he spent a lot of his career working in London, obviously in Silicon Valley, and also here in Ireland, is that what's worked well in Silicon Valley is obviously the venture capital and that kind of community that's been there for a very long time, but they've always taken a long-term approach. And what you're talking about, the FDI and the IDA investments, they're not things that, you know, you see the results of in 12 months time. You see them in a long return on investment, and we're seeing that return now. The other similarity is that, you know, people in Ireland, I feel from my experience, do want to pay it forward. You know, there's a huge community of tech leaders of all ages and all experiences, you know, wanting to pay it forward to the community. And that's really the ethos of Leaders of Tech. We do a lot of different things across education. We do things across coaching and mentoring, networking, you know, but really the ethos is paying it forward. And, you know, the fact that we do that here in Ireland is one of the big similarities that David spotted in, David Singleton, I should say, spotted in Silicon Valley. And I'm glad that you picked up on that as well. And there's many other things as well, but I think that's something that rings true.
I think the other interesting thing about the IDA's focus for foreign direct investment, they really incentivize R&D and the higher value activities. So the types of people that are being attracted here to join maybe some of the bigger tech companies is very much with an R&D focus. And when those people after 2 or 3 or 4 years decide that they want to look for their next opportunity, they're coming out with that real entrepreneurial spirit and drive to innovate. And that certainly is, I think, what pushes it for us forward, because at least in Aer Lingus, finding people that are going to challenge us, finding people that are going to help us think differently than, you know, an airline that's been around for 70 or 80 years is really important to modernizing how we think about technology and think about digital.
Yeah, it's the work we're actually doing here, which is most impressive. Dorothy, Rent the Runway's, you know, infamous for having a incredibly strong female led and leadership team. Something that, you know, we should all be very proud of. But I can gender diversity in engineering has and probably will be a challenge for some time. What would you say to engineers, data scientists, any technologists, or anybody for that matter, you know, across Europe that are considering a career move to Ireland? You know, female engineers, you know, at the moment, I think, unfortunately, we don't have enough of them. And a lot of the work, I think, at the moment that people are thinking about, how do we encourage them, goes back to education and earlier years. But what's your thoughts on the topic? And maybe, you know, it doesn't necessarily need to be Rent the Runway, but your own thoughts, you know, around the topic and what we can all be doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that isn't going to change overnight. So my background is I have a bachelor's degree in electronic engineering, and there was only one other woman in my class in university. And, you know, all throughout my whole career, it was generally, you know, very, very few females in a room when you're talking about any kind of tech conversations. What I loved when I was approached about this job in Rent the Runway is, you know, it's very much a female-led team. Our 2 co-founders are female. And actually, given that we've just gone through an IPO, it's a nice point to notice that our CEO, CFO, and COO and president are all female. So it's the first time in history that that's actually happened, which I think really lends itself to viewing more role models when we're talking to people who are considering a career in science, technology, engineering, and maths. When I was growing up, I had very supportive parents who were very tech focused, actually. And I remember when I was very young, about 3 or 4, helping my dad fix the Christmas tree lights, you know, trying to understand how the whole thing worked. And I think it does start really at such an early age. And I'm very aware that I'm in a unique position, and I was in quite a unique position. However, I think companies sometimes fall too easily on the whole idea that, oh, we just can't get female engineers. They're there. We just need to look harder and actually be more thoughtful about how we create our job descriptions. There's a lot of research done on when women want to apply for a job, they feel they need to hit 100% of all of the skills and essential talents that you may need. Whereas a guy can, look at a job, maybe hit 50 or 60 or 70% of them, and then still apply, which is great. But I think trying to get more role models out there and encourage women to really apply for these roles, like it starts early on, but if it starts during primary school, secondary school, university, and then beyond that. And really, I think we're quite unique in Rent the Runway. 41% of our tech team are female, and we don't take that lightly either. I think we get amazing people applying for the jobs because of the challenges and the career paths that are available to them as well in Rent the Runway. We have very clear career progression, whether you're a junior engineer or whether you're a staff level engineer or senior staff, technical architect. And always also through a parallel path of people management. So you can start out as an engineering manager, develop to director, senior director to VP of engineering. And I think that's also what is very attractive for all genders, is like, can you really showcase some great people who have gone through their career, having gone through the various levels, picked up various skills, maybe through different industries. So it's definitely doable. I just think sometimes we have to try a bit harder and actually make it easier for people to choose tech and STEM subjects as career choices.
Yeah, I think, that's amazing to hear that. I wasn't aware of some of those stats, so that's really, really impressive. But you're right. I mean, it's not something you can change midway through someone's career. It really needs to be encouraged from a younger age, but hopefully we do see some improvements. But I think, it's too easy just to say we need to wait and, it'll organically get better. I think there's things we can all be doing to accelerate that progression. So I'm glad to hear you say that. As I said, it's a little bit too easy to say we just need to wait, but it is a challenge and it's a very real one. And what I'm encouraged by is the amount of people that I'm speaking to who take it really, really seriously. It's not a buzzword. It's not something that they think they should be looking at, but maybe it's not at the top of their priority list. I talk to lots of people and it's right up at the top of their priority list, and they're taking it genuinely seriously, which is really encouraging.
I think there are two schools of thought. There are, companies who feel that they should do it, and companies who see the value in doing it. And that's, across gender and backgrounds, ethnicities. The more varied our team members are, the more different perspectives we have. So I think it's really important to get, all opinions around a table and all different perspectives. Otherwise, you just end up recreating the same thing over and over again.
Absolutely.
That's exactly the angle we try to take, Dorothy. At the end of the day, people using our products are at least 50% female. And if it's all males designing them and building them and testing them and deploying them, you're definitely missing something. And the same with other types of diversity. The challenge is just in the face of pressure to just hire somebody now, be strong enough to say, no, we got to look harder. We haven't found the right candidate for the role. And this is not going to get us to those diversity targets we're really pushing towards. So 40+% is really impressive, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Dorothy, just another question. So like Leaders of Tech is a large community, primarily based in Ireland, but we've got extensions out to Europe and the US, and a large portion of our members are at the early stage of their career. They're graduates, they're in their first role. A lot of them actually might even be still in school age, which is really cool, because what we're trying to have is diversity of thought, and also essentially giving back and paying it forward. So the best people we can have impact on, not exclusively, but the best impact we can have is with people at the earlier stages of their career. What advice would you give to people starting off their career, be they based in Ireland or across Europe? You've had a very successful career. So any kind of pieces of advice that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think especially when you're early in your career, you have the huge opportunity to really show what you're about and what you're made of. So I think focusing on execution is something that's incredibly important. Like you say, you're going to do something, follow through, do it, and do it incredibly well. Because I think that will serve you long term throughout your career, because people will understand, A, you can do it, B, you're dependable, and that you're confident in your ability to actually continuously deliver. And it's the continuously deliver part of it which I think will serve you well long term in the career, no matter what level you're at. That goes for every level of every organization. The other one I think would be really about, you know, going back to the role models and having a mentor and having people advocate for you while you're not in the room, and being very focused on what is your career path, where do you want to get to, and ensuring that you're clear on where you want to get to, because nobody's going to help you figure it out unless you're working with them on that as well. So so being focused, I think, is the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I think that's sound advice for even all professions, to be honest, being focused. And if you say you're going to do something, do it, and, you know, kind of stay on top of things, give people a good first impression. Around the coaching and mentoring, Leaders of Tech had a mentoring initiative earlier this year. It was really, really successful. We partnered about 75 mentors with about, I think it was around 50 mentees who were leaders in tech. And the feedback was phenomenal. We've rolled it now into a series. So if people are interested in learning about mentorship or even finding a mentor, we can certainly help them with that. One of the fascinating pieces of feedback that I got from that was that a lot of the people who were doing the mentorship got a lot out of it. And a lot of the feedback. So we checked with everybody, how do they enjoy the initiative? And, you know, the vast majority of them really, really got a lot from it, which is great. And that's why we're continuing it. But the feedback from the people who are actually mentoring people, they learned a lot. And I think that's like, if anybody needs encouragement to become a mentor, I think that's something that they can take away. And it was really consistent. It wasn't just, you know, one or two people anecdotally. It was pretty consistent about everybody who took place. So I think in all organizations, people can look at mentorship and how that can help. Dorothy, I might ask you a final question around Rent the Runway and what sort of opportunities they are. You touched on it already, but if there were kind of a couple of highlights that you'd like to share with us around the talent that you look for, or the types of people that you're looking for, the skills you're looking for, what would you flag to our audience today?
Yeah, from, you know, a back-end development perspective, it's generally Java skills, like, and that's across all levels. We have some amazing engineers and could always do with more as we grow the office here in Ireland. We have recently also decided to open up some product manager roles in Rent the Runway. So especially if people have experience in e-commerce, it's incredibly important. Our customers are in love with our products. So we always want to ensure that we're really close to our customers and developing products in conjunction with our product managers, with engineering. There's a really nice marriage that happens there when product and engineering work really closely together. So, so that is the second one. And then always data science, machine learning engineering. There is such a great wealth of experience here in Ireland and in Europe, really, for these skills. So we have some amazing roles available, and keep posted. I will hopefully keep you posted on more to come as well.
Thanks. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us. Dhanya, I might ask you, again, we talked about before this session that I wanted to touch in with, you know, there's a big buzz about working remotely, and everyone's talking about how do you do it? How do you do it well? There's now talked about returning to the office and working in a hybrid way. You said something really interesting to me about working remotely, and with some of your teams, it's important to actually meet in person and have that kind of, you know, physical in-person contact for certain pieces of work. And tell me a little bit about that and what you're doing at Unitek at the moment.
Yeah, I'm actually a big advocate of remote work. I think the full-time office is not a thing going forward. The hybrid frame of work is what I'm advocating for. But then physically being closer to office is required for a number of reasons. Like the first one being while we could hire from anywhere, I would look for developers for specific roles. And if they're working with critical IP that is very critical to the business, the developers would have to be bound by the same rules and regulations as us. Secondly, for site reliability engineering infrastructure, that is where I'd like to hire more from the same place because of, again, sensitivity, data, database, etc. is maintained by them. And then there are a few days where it's important for us to meet in the office and be there in the room. Maybe at the beginning of a project where we are brainstorming, or to close up, to finish the project where everybody has to interact and collaborate. But a very real example that happened recently is that Unitek was a part of a hackathon sponsored by the CEOs of NatWest, National Australia Bank, CIBU, and Itaú in Brazil, and which is a very big deal for a fintech startup like us. And we entered semifinals recently and are waiting for results, but would not have happened without all of us like being in the same room, changing decisions every half an hour once based on what is achievable, can be done within this time frame, build everything, work out together. Like we can't achieve that in a remote setting with someone going, can't hear you, can't see the screen, not available, internet's down, like there is no time for that kind of. So there's days like that where the team has to be there, has to be together, everyone's on the same page all the time, in sync. So there is that need of being in the office for some days. Like that's my experience now.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think there's a place for, work. Like it all comes down to how do we work the smartest and how do we work the best. And, we're all individuals, and some people will want to work remotely forever, and that's fine. Some people hate the thought of working remotely and want to get back into the office 5 days a week, and that's fine too. But really the best way of working is probably somewhere in the middle. But I think it's not for us to dictate to people how they have to work. It's, spending the time to understand how we can get the best out of people and how they really want to work, and treating people like individuals. But yeah, sometimes you just, be it innovation or, a hackathon or just getting something solved. Also, if something goes really wrong, or there's a super challenge, we've all just got through a pandemic or still getting through it. Sometimes you need people to go into a war room and just get things solved. So no, I agree with you on that. And congratulations for, some of the successes that you've had as well during, a pandemic. You've scaled your business. You've obviously had a lot of successes. Can you tell us a little bit more about your business pre-pandemic and where you're at today?
Yeah, like Unitek going into the pandemic was one year old, and we were 4 people, and we've emerged out of the pandemic with 28 people. Most of the growth has come within the technology team. We raised funds remotely twice. Some of the announcement will come in the next quarter, I think. And then we also started working with one of the largest companies in the world, Legal & General, which is a FTSE 100. That is one major success. And we've onboarded a number of Irish companies as well, who are dealing with financial services. I think just as an introduction with Unitek's actually a no-code automation platform. And we allow financial services companies to digitally transform their businesses. Legacy technology is a problem, like Dave mentioned, and a lot of paper-based tech processes are also a problem. And that's what we kind of join up with. A lot of our machine learning and data science is about data extraction from these papers and how we can automate the entry of data into legacy technologies or into cloud-based technologies, which is even simpler, that you plug in and enter the data into them. That's what we do, and I think which was very relevant in the pandemic world. A lot of companies could not have gone on with their business without being able to do this remotely and online.
Yeah, I think there's no shortage of companies that are under the pressure to transform. Probably had a transformation agenda pre-pandemic, but that's been pushed up to the top of the to-do list. So congratulations with your successes. What sort of talents would you be interested in? Obviously, you've got developers, you've got people working in data science. What sort of roles or skills do you look for?
Right now, it's mostly all about scaling. So we have a number of openings in the infrastructure, site reliability engineering, security, and data engineering. Those are the roles that's open at Unitek right now.
Excellent. Well, we'll advise people to keep an eye on Unitek, and obviously thanks for sharing that with us today. Dave, for our audience, like you've worked internationally, as you know, we touched on this at the start of our conversation, but do you have advice to people coming to Ireland around, okay, there's going to be opportunities in your organization, there's going to be opportunities you know, across lots of different types of companies. But I guess two questions. One, what is your advice to somebody considering a move in Ireland and how to go about that? And two, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening at Aer Lingus at the moment, and where there might be opportunities for people there?
Yeah, sure. So I think anyone thinking about a move to Ireland, it's a great time to come to Ireland, as I said already. Because we have such a multinational workforce now, we have a huge amount of meetups, we have a huge amount of groups meeting regularly in these small cities and exchanging ideas. So whatever you're interested in, whatever you like to talk about, just get out there and get involved, sign up to a meetup or two. And because there's so many companies like the 3 on the calls a day and thousands more trying to hire you, you'll find that these meetups are sponsored. They're often nice offices. There's often some nice food to go with it. It's a great time to just come and find ways to build a network and connect with people. And of course, that's where the opportunities emerge from. You start to get to know people, they start to get to know you, that pushes your thinking, and that introduces you to other ideas and other people. There's a great website, Tech Life Ireland, that gives quite a good overview of sort of how to come to Ireland and how to get started and all of that. So by all means, have a browse in that. But I think it's just a very buzzing community right now of people that have been sort of locked up for 18 months, dying to get out again, dying to make face-to-face connections again, and spread their network. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing around Aer Lingus, so I mentioned earlier about the sort of the legacy stack and this fantastic technology that, you know, let's be honest, it's still running 60 years later, and our whole business runs in it. So that's engineering marvel, but it was never designed to do all the things we expect it to do today. So we used the pandemic somewhat wisely in that we were able to quietly work away and modernizing a lot of that stack while it was less critical. So, you know, when you've got 60 or 70 flights a day and you take down a critical system, that's really disruptive. When you get 3 flights a day, not such a big deal. So we were trying to take advantage of that quieter time over the last 18 months to try and upgrade some of that stuff. And when it comes to jobs in Aer Lingus, we're finding people are actually really interested in the sort of modern technology we're moving to now. Quite different from maybe 3 years ago when nobody really wanted to code in COBOL, or nobody really wanted to code in 20-year-old technology. But now when we're talking about the latest AWS services, as we move everything we've got into the cloud, or the data engineering we're trying to do now, the data science we're trying to do now, we're getting much more interest. And the other reality for us is that, you know, expectations have dramatically changed over 18 months, because everybody, you know, from, you know, my youngest child who's 4 to maybe my mom who's in her 70s is now much more familiar with digital devices than they were 18 months ago. So your expectation of a travel experience is far more digital than it was 18 months ago, which puts a lot of pressure back on the airlines and on our industry to innovate. And the aviation industry has come a long way, but it's got a long way to go in terms of how we can use digital technologies to make your journey to the airport more seamless, your experience in the airport more seamless, your experience on board more seamless. So the exciting thing I think about Aer Lingus or any of the aviation companies is you're really getting to build stuff that your friends and family will use, because most people fly and most of what we build is used by our end customers. So that's great. So all sorts of roles that the guys have mentioned already, we're also looking for, and plenty more besides.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us. And I might wrap it up there. I think today's chat was really interesting, really insightful. So thank you all for your time. I think one of the most important things for Leaders of Tech is to be a platform for people to access opportunities, networks. Ireland is a great community. I think we're really welcoming when people come here. We're very quick to make them feel at home, be it joining community, joining a company, or even joining a meetup. But if people are considering coming to Ireland and want to chat to us, I'm more than happy to try and steer them in the right direction. If you're interested in finding out more about Leaders of Tech, our website is leadersoftech.org. And if anybody has any other questions about this series or anything that's been mentioned in the series, feel free to reach out to me. But until the next time, I just want to thank everyone again, Dave, Dorothy, Dhanya. I really appreciate your time today. And thanks everybody for joining in.